Hello and welcome to the Curated Conversation webinar series, brought to you by the Master of Arts in Cultural Heritage Management, the Master of Arts in Museum Studies, and the Johns Hopkins University Office of Advanced Academic Programs. Today's event features a discussion on building intelligent museums. Please note today's event will be recorded and uploaded to the AAP YouTube channel under the Curated Conversations playlist. During the program, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function, and we will answer as many questions as possible during the latter portion of the event. With that, I will turn over the presentation to our moderator, Dr. Karina Rizovich, Associate Program Director and Senior Lecturer for the Master of Arts in Museum Studies.
Thank you. Welcome to this evening's Curated Conversation event. As you just heard from Natalie, I'm Karina Rizovich. I'm the Associate Director of the Museum Studies program. And on behalf of both the Museum Studies and Cultural Heritage programs, I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's speaker series event, exploring the extremely timely topic of artificial intelligence as it intersects with and evolves with the museum world. This evening's event is an opportunity to explore the evolving role of museums today, and we hope you join our conversation. We host exciting events like this several times a year, and will next be convening on April 15th at noon to hear about material culture and issues such as repatriation and decolonization. As you can see, we really like to plunge into pressing issues of our day and our field. To that end, we are going to now welcome our moderator for this evening's event, Dr. Joyce Ray. She is the Assistant Program Director and Senior Lecturer for the MA in Museum Studies, and she directs all of our digital curation programs. She spent 10 years at the National Archives and Records Administration and was the Acting Program Director of the National Historical Publications and Records Commission. She was also an Associate Deputy at the Institute of Museum and Library Services. We are so lucky to have her on our team and here tonight. She will now introduce our two panelists.
Nik Honeysett is the CEO of the Balboa Park Online Collaborative, which provides digital services to the 18 museums in the Balboa Park complex in San Diego, and also does consulting with museums across the United States. Alexandra, Alex Kron, is the community manager for Terentia, software consultancy that serves museums and other cultural heritage institutions. Nik has more than 30 years experience in management, administration, IT, and strategy in the cultural sector. Before joining the Balboa Park Online Collaborative as CEO in 2014, he was head of administration at the J. Paul Getty Museum, where he led its digital transformation and engagement initiatives, in addition to having responsibility for all administrative functions and operations of the Getty Museum. Before moving to Los Angeles and the Getty, he was a software development consultant in the UK, serving the cultural sector throughout Europe and the US. He has served on the boards of the American Alliance of Museums, the Museum Computer Network, and he is the current board president of the Institute of Learning Innovation. And I might mention, he was also one of the founding faculty of our Museum Studies program. Alex is a consultant with over 15 years experience in education, specializing in collections management, digital asset management, and digital preservation, with a focus on cultural technology solutions. She has held positions as Curator of Collections at the San Diego Model Railroad Museum. She was Digital Operations and Collections Information Analyst at the Balboa Park Online Collaborative, and now is Community Manager for Terentia, which is a fully integrated platform for digital asset management, collections management, and collections engagement. She is also a graduate of our Museum Studies and Digital Curation programs, and she is currently a lecturer here in these programs in our Museum Studies Digital Curation program.
I think I'm set to go first, and I'm going to provide some context around this discussion topic. So I'm going to share my screen, and you should know that I'm going to share a link to this. It's a Canva presentation. I'm going to share a link to it at the end, so you're more than welcome to. If you want to take screenshots, that's great, but there's no need because I'm going to share the entire presentation with you. Plus, there'll be a recording. Okay, so my name is Nik Honeysett. I'm CEO of the Balboa Park Online Collaborative, BPOC. We are located in San Diego's Balboa Park, home to about 30 cultural institutions. 17 of those are collecting museums. We provide a whole suite of services, including IT services and support, strategic planning, digital strategy, and certainly over the last couple of years, we've been delving heavily into AI. So I'm going to talk about the kind of state of play of AI from our perspective in museums. So I wanted to start off with a kind of a few concepts. I'm going to share some data throughout this presentation, and this data is based on a survey of the Association of Art Museum Curators. I did a presentation for them last year, and I did a survey prior to that around AI. So what you're seeing here was a question, which is, how ready is your institution to explore or adopt AI tools in curatorial practice? What's fascinating about this is if you're familiar with the adoption curve, which is this bell-shaped curve, which describes in any group of people their kind of willingness to adopt new technology, and you'll see that certainly the first half of it maps very accurately to the adoption curve. So we're kind of following the adoption curve in the adoption of AI. You can see how this breaks down: innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. And so the innovative side is these are visionary, kind of non-traditional people, tend to be more digital. On the laggard side, skeptic about adoption, more traditional, want to consume stuff in an analog fashion. And this is important when you think about, because in any group of people, not only in an institution, a museum, you're going to get this group of people, but also your audience is also the same. So just to kind of frame that there is some people who are totally up for AI adoption and embrace it, and others who are, it's the last thing that they want to do. So we'll get into some of the details of that. So here's really the state of play of what's happening in museums, certainly from our perspective. A lot of museum boards have for-profit corporate board members who are embracing very proactively AI adoption. They see it as a significant opportunity, productivity, capability, etc. And so there's board pressure on museum leadership to come up with an AI strategy. The challenge is that leadership don't really have much time to spend thinking about this, so there's a gap. There are no policies in place, certainly from our standpoint. Very few museums have actually communicated a policy to their staff. Meanwhile, most staff are using AI in their daily work, probably using personal accounts, possibly even using, and probably even using free versions of that, which we know is problematic, particularly if you are sharing information with it. So the takeaway is AI adoption, from what we're seeing, is definitely bottom up. As with all things, technology moves really quickly, and so governance needs to catch up with that. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Here's some more data. I love data. This was a KPMG survey on the left-hand side of how do people around the world feel about the rise of AI in daily life? And the US is at the top of more concerned than excited. And you can see going down varying levels of concern, excitement, excited and concerned. There's an interesting, and that QR code is a link to that survey. Also, as part of this curatorial survey, we asked, do you believe AI will have a positive or negative impact on your job security in the next 25 years? 25% negative impact, 25% unsure. Some people think there's going to be no impact. The quarter seems unlikely that there'd be no impact, and then positive impact. There's also increasingly we're seeing unionization across museums, which has been going on for quite a few years. But there are now more prevalent clauses around AI not replacing human jobs as part of that bargaining. So a couple of broad concepts. Museums have been digitizing, a lot of it originally around collections to provide access, but really you have to think of digitization now as fuel for AI. If an institution is thinking about how to build its own large language model, if you're familiar with that term, really digitizing is fuel, and not just collections, but everything is fuel for AI. It builds that foundational infrastructure to be able to get more out of your interactions with AI. And again, I'll talk a little bit more detail about that. So digitization is infrastructure for intelligence. The risk is without any governance and unpoliced and unguided, data may get used in unanticipated ways. And so museums should be adopting governance early. This would include rights, sensitivity, restrictions, usage, etc. Another concept, broadly, if you've been using Google certainly for the last maybe 4 to 6 months, you'll notice that when you search, rather than getting a set of results, you're actually getting an AI interpretation. This is massively affected, particularly museum websites, who saw a huge spike in traffic, which was all the AI bots, and then a fairly significant drop in traffic because now Google is taking away that traffic. So Google is providing a response to queries, and it reduces the need for people to leave Google and go to that referral or that originating website. That's a big problem. Now we're moving, if you're familiar with the term search engine optimization, we're now moving into the field of GEO, which is generative engine optimization, which is how do we design our websites and the content to be much more AI friendly. But what's happening is in this example of this, rather than searching for something, you're actually having a conversation and a dialogue and you're asking something. There's a great example with the Archives of American Art, who have used all their data to create this kind of question and answer interaction with the data for their archives. So access becomes dialogue, not browsing. AI answers confidently, even when it's completely wrong, and we'll talk about hallucinations, which is actually a feature rather than a bug. And I know Alex is going to delve much more detailed into this. Building trusted AI, so you can be sure that the data that is fueling your AI interaction is actually trusted and giving you accurate results. Static to dynamic interpretation. This is a great example. This QR code is to a website called the Living Museum. A coder in Canada took the British Museum's entire collection, which was released as Creative Commons, and just created an AI layer over it. So you can have conversation with any of these dialogues at any educational level, in any language, from any lens or theme that you are interested in. The revolution here is interpretation is responsive and inclusive and personalized. The challenge is that museums can lose control, they can lose accuracy, potentially authority. And as we know, AI, certainly the response is it's not artificial intelligence, it's actually statistics, and it's returning responses from AI are literally built on statistical relevance of words and word patterns. And so it's kind of an averaging effect. So responses from AI are kind of moving towards this kind of flattened generic baseline, which you've probably experienced. So in response, museums need to be treating AI like a publication platform with all the editorial guidelines and goals and rigor behind it that they would do that under any circumstance. We're also, you may have heard the term agentic AI. That's where we're going now. We used to go to websites and interact with an AI engine and cut and paste into a document or whatever it is. Now, and Alex has a great example of this, there's AI services and agents behind some of the apps that we're using. You can see this in generic productivity apps, Excel, Word, all those kinds of things, but increasingly programmatic applications will have AI behind them to enhance the experience. We've done a project with a non-profit environmental organization a lot of concerns. I won't go into detail here. A lot of concerns about the impact on the environment. I have some data about that, but certainly the irony here is a nonprofit that needs to become more productive and efficient in its operations is embracing something that is counter to its mission, which is to be environmentally sustainable. Again, you'll have access to this so you can see this in detail. I talked about governance. A lot of museums do not have a policy around AI usage, but many of the things that are required in it are probably already existing in the staff handbook, so that already the guidelines are under which staff are operating as an employee. Data privacy, IT security, intellectual property and copyright, professional conduct, all these are required as part of your generic job. So there are only really a few things that institutions need to address specifically for AI or broaden some of the directives in their policy. Public trust is probably one of the key things, and transparency of usage of AI is probably one of the key things that museums need to do because they are institutions of trust and are one of the kind of rank highest when it comes to institutions and their trustworthiness with the public. Transparency, curatorial practice, it isn't, transparency isn't new for cultural organizations, so it's just an extension of what they're doing. Cultural organizations should be open as well. I know for a fact that some of them aren't, particularly with disclosing their financials sometimes. And really just AI just extends this to digital work, and it just makes digital activities and investment in digital much more rigorous, certainly than it has been. We've developed a green AI policy specifically for this institution to go through, and so figuring out what platforms are the most energy efficient, what usage of an interaction with a large language model is most intensive, that is going to be most impactful on the climate. But I think generally speaking, let me show you this. So here's a table of the current AI platforms and ranking who's doing better. Google Gemini is top of the list. Pretty much every platform has and every service provider of AI has some kind of carbon neutral strategy in the future because they know it's a big issue for many people. We saw this with digital marketplaces and digital currencies. People voted with their feet and preferred to use marketplaces that were much more energy efficient, and so these large language model providers have taken note of that, and so they all intend to be carbon neutral. I'll give one shout out at the bottom to a platform in Europe, which is a completely carbon neutral already platform, which is designed for nonprofits who have kind of mission and values that align with climate environmental changes. Okay, that was a lot of information. I'm going to give you the QR code in a minute. But I think we listen to the hype from the tech companies who are basically hyping to sell, to bring in shareholders, right, to boost the investment in their company. And at the other extreme, you've got the media companies who are trying to bring to light all the issues with it. And anybody who's using AI in a regular way will know that it has a lot of challenges, but it also has a lot of opportunities. And I'll leave you with this quote. There is a danger that some jobs are losing, but Roy Amara has this quote about we overestimate the impact of technology in the near term, but underestimate it in the long term. And you are certainly seeing an overestimation of its ability right now, but it is going to have a massive impact over the long term. And here is the QR code for this presentation to consume at your leisure.
As Nik's made it pretty clear, AI is becoming a routine part of our personal and professional lives. Many museums are beginning to develop policies, frameworks, and guidance for its use, but it's not enough to focus on AI tools in isolation. We also have to examine how AI intersects with the systems that we already rely on in our daily work. Many of us are already using AI in small and everyday ways, including spell checking emails, summarizing text, or generating captions. At the same time, museums are experimenting with more ambitious AI-enhanced projects that shape digital experiences, interpretation, and discovery. These uses, they directly affect our collections data, including metadata and access decisions around that data. Now, today, I really want to focus on how AI is influencing those technologies that we use to manage our digital collections specifically, and how museums are leveraging AI in responsible ways, or should be leveraging AI in responsible ways, specifically about digital asset management systems, or DAMs. Now, DAMs often get dismissed as expensive file storage, but when they are intentionally designed and well managed, they play a much more significant role. They provide structure, governance, context that make ethical, responsible, and sustainable AI use possible. And you'll hear me repeat a lot of that throughout my presentation, but it's very intentional. And my goal today is for you to see a digital asset management system not as a passive repository, but as an essential piece of infrastructure, one that supports that trustworthy data governance and acts as a reliable source of truth for AI as it becomes more embedded in your museum's work. And I would even argue that AI in museums is not necessarily or primarily a tools problem, but rather a data governance problem, as Nik already talked about in his presentation. So before I go into digital asset management systems, I just want to talk about AI tools and what it is that's behind them. Nik already talked extensively about pattern recognition. A lot of us, I'm even guilty of this, of just thinking about how AI tools just magically create these answers for us when we're, asking questions or looking for responses in ChatGPT. But in the museum, in the GLAM sector context, AI doesn't understand our collections. It doesn't really understand history or even cultural nuance. It can't interpret meaning. As I said, it identifies patterns. Now, most AI systems are trained on large data sets, and they learn statistical relationships between words, images, and sounds. So when you enter a prompt, the system isn't really retrieving verified knowledge. It's generating the most probable response based on the patterns it's been trained on, that the patterns in the data that it's been trained on. Now, that distinction is really important. And to clarify even further is that the AI outputs are derivative. They're not authoritative, and they really reflect the quality, structure, and bias of the data that they're trained on and the data that they're given access to. When that's applied to cultural heritage materials, AI relies entirely on the digital files and metadata that we provide it. If that information is inconsistent, incomplete, or historically biased, AI will not fix those issues. In fact, it will reproduce and even amplify them at scale, which many of us have already started to see. AI lacks awareness of uncertainty, sensitivity, special cultural sensitivity for our tribal communities. It cannot distinguish between a draft or a final record, or between public use materials, restricted content, unless those distinctions are explicitly made in our systems. And I want to make that clear because while I'm saying all of these things that AI can't do, it's because we have to make those distinctions clear. We have to provide that information to those AI systems. So responsible AI use isn't just primarily about mastering those new tools, which skills are important. I'll talk about that too. But It's really about governance. It's about understanding what data is shaping those outputs, what boundaries are in place, and how institutional authority is maintained. Of course, AI increases speed and scale, but it's not going to replace critical judgment. So as we're using those AI tools more and more, we're seeing a rise of what I'm going to call AI enhanced projects. And by that, I mean projects where AI supports human work, not replacing it. In a museum context, this looks like generating or enriching metadata, suggesting keywords, possibly identifying people or places in images, transcribing handwritten documents, or converting audio and video into searchable text. These applications can improve access and scale description for extensive backlogs of collections, but that may have little or no cataloging data. But AI's role isn't limited to efficiency. AI is increasingly also shaping search and discovery. It can influence which objects are surfaced, how materials are connected, what patterns are becoming visible in your collections. It may not be making curatorial decisions, but it is shaping interpretive pathways in a way that we may not have previously considered. And now that influence might be subtle, but it is significant. And the reason being is because once AI begins to shape that visibility and connection, it becomes part of an interpretive layer of your institution. And that raises an important question as to what ensures that influence is grounded in institutional authority rather than patterned guesswork. Now, this is where systems like your digital asset management system is going to become critical. And because if AI is going to influence meaning, it must be anchored in structure, governance, and authoritative data. AI presents a paradigm shift for museums and cultural institutions. It can expand access, accelerate description, and surface patterns, as I've talked about. But that opportunity also comes with risks. We've seen AI systems hallucinate, reinforce bias, or generate confident but inaccurate results. And this isn't really simply a technical flaw. It reflects a deeper reality, and that's that. And again, this is going to be a repetitive theme throughout my presentation, is that AI outputs are only as reliable as the data and the systems that shape them. And now we often say that AI depends on good inputs, but that issue is also more structural than that. And this is where infrastructure like your digital asset management system becomes essential. Your dams is what provides that structured environment that mitigates many of the core risks associated with AI use. Nik talked about this in his presentation about rights and access restrictions, but we're also talking about enforcing controlled vocabularies and validation rules and embedding metadata review in your digital asset management workflows. So for example, some digital asset management systems can clearly flag AI-generated suggestions for curators and catalogers or registrars to review and keep that AI output distinctive from authoritative records. Some systems deliberately separate that AI-generated content so that staff can decide what, if anything, should be incorporated into the official record. And that's where that distinction really matters. I really love this. A useful way to think about your dams is as a truth anchor within the institution. It's a phrase that I heard from Sarah Iskander, CEO of GateB at the Henry Stewart Dam Conference this last year. And it's one that I feel really is increasingly relevant in the context of AI. At its core, a dams is the authoritative source of truth for your digital assets. It's where files live with stable identifiers, consistent metadata, documented provenance, version history, fixity checks, and clearly defined relationships between originals and derivatives. That role matters because AI is used, that role matters whether or not AI is used within the dams or outside of it. When AI operates within the dams, It does so inside of a governed environment. It can assist with transcription, tagging, metadata enrichment, but under your institution's rules. Human review is built into your workflows. You have rights, you have access controls, you even can have ethical constraints shape what AI process, what your AI tools or systems can process and how outputs are shared. We've seen clients leverage their dams in a way where they create indicators within their metadata structure of what records can be used to train AI or the AI systems that they're using. Now, when AI operates outside the dams through integrations, research tools, or public-facing platforms, your dams, still anchors the process. Trusted source files and reviewed metadata ensure that those outputs remain grounded in your institution's knowledge. Now, without that anchor, AI systems are more likely to rely on incomplete or decontextualized data. Of course, with it, your institution can trace outputs back to authoritative records and maintain accountability. Now, I just want to take a moment to talk about being AI ready in the context of digital asset management. AI readiness, as I've said before, is about having governed data that is consistent, contextualized, permissioned, reviewable. A well-designed DAMs enforces metadata standards, preserves relationships between assets, tracks provenance and version history, and embeds rights and access controls directly into your workflows. Those capabilities are what ensure that AI systems can operate within institutional boundaries rather than outside them. Now, without, of course, that structure, where the AI systems that you're using will amplify inconsistency and ambiguity. Just as importantly, the DAMs ensures that AI-generated content is distinguishable from those authoritative records. Those workflows might look like suggestions being reviewed or approved or rejected before becoming a part of the official collections data record. AI-ready metadata isn't just about optimizing for AI technology. It's really about reinforcing your data governance. And when the DAMs enforces your standards, permissions, and accountability, AI can scale responsibly. Now, of course, Nik's already talked extensively about the AI policies and frameworks, and how I would like to talk about how your system, specifically the digital asset management system, can become an operational layer. Policies are essential, but they don't enforce them. Systems do. If your AI policy requires transparency, your DAMs makes that visible. AI-generated descriptions, transcripts, or keywords can be clearly labeled through metadata fields or flags. Transparency moves from a written policy or principle to something staff and potentially even the public can see and verify. If accountability is a priority for your institution, the DAM supports it through audit logs, version history, and structured review workflows, as I've talked about before. And the system records who are reviewed by AI outputs, what changes are made and who approved them. Responsibility becomes then documented and it's no longer informal. If ethics and rights are central to your framework, which of course they should be, those constraints need to be enforceable. So that we're talking rights metadata, again, access controls and permissions that determine which assets AI can process and how outputs might be shared, whether that's within your institution or out externally to the public. Those rules are applied consistently and reduce the risk of misuse. In this way, your DAMs turns AI governance from aspirational into infrastructure, and it allows your institution to not just claim responsible AI use, but also demonstrate it. And governance doesn't stop just internally. When selecting AI tools or systems, or even your digital asset management system, institutions should also evaluate vendor policies, data ownership, and sustainability commitments. Responsible AI also includes retaining control of your data and aligning technology choices with your environmental and ethical values. I really loved that rating chart that you shared, Nick. I'm going to have to steal that from you.
Go ahead.
That's I have to say that's how your governance scales through systems, workflows, and procurement decisions. Nick talked about this earlier, but he mentioned it, that I would share this earlier, and I'd like to close with this real world example of the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library that's currently under construction in Medora, North Dakota. They're scheduled to open in July 2026 for the U.S. semi-quincentennial. What makes this project really unique is that it began without a traditional collection because Roosevelt's presidency predates the legislation that created the National Archive system. The library started with almost no physical materials on site and no existing digital infrastructure. So to build its collection, the team had to aggregate records and digital assets from more than 30 institutions, including Harvard, the Library of Congress, and the National Archives. Now, this immediately raised familiar challenges, such as data consistency, provenance, rights, and of course, trust, the same issues we confront when discussing AI in museums. Their solution was to establish a single system of record, what is being called a trusted AI digital repository that consolidates collections data and digital assets, controls access, and integrates AI tools through APIs. This gave them the ability to have granular control over what data could be used for their AI system and under what conditions. And I want to highlight a critical element here of the human in the loop workflow that they have. So they leverage OCR and AI tools to assist with transcription and metadata enrichment, but nothing is published automatically. They have archivists review those outputs, approve high confidence records, and flag others for deeper review. Corrections are fed back into their system, improving performance over time. That governed, curated data powers a public-facing experience which is very similar to a GPT-enabled reading room that links answers back to primary sources, and immersive exhibits designed with ethical guardrails. What this demonstrates is that AI can accelerate projects that once took decades, if we're going to be honest here, but only when it's grounded in strong infrastructure, governance, and most importantly, human oversight. And I would love to be able to share this GPT. I know Susan Sarna from the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library talked about this at their Henry Stewart presentation earlier this month, but it's not going live, I believe, until July of this year. So keep an eye out. I'm happy to share more about that. If there's one thing I really want you to take away from today, it's this. It's that AI initiatives in museums are only as strong as their policies, systems, and data behind them. AI can help scale access, discovery, and research, but only when it's built on well-governed systems and data. Now, whether you're working with your own GPT, data aggregation projects like linked open data, or long-term digital preservation, strong data, digital asset governance is the foundation that you need to be successful.
So, thank you, Alex. Wow, that was a whirlwind and very informative tour of what's going on with AI in museums. I would like to go back to a question that came up in the Q&A to revisit that if we can. It's about the issue of how some of these external forces, which, now we're seeing that some, as Nick said, with Google and Gemini, but we've seen previous iterations with Google Arts and Culture and the Digital Public Library of America, serving as aggregators to take, metadata information about museums and put it on an external site, and whether that is a positive or a negative in terms of driving traffic to back to the data provider site, the museum site. I don't know about Google Arts and Culture specifically, but I understand from Digital Public Library of America that museums that have contributed to it have definitely seen increased traffic to their websites. So it's concerning to me to think about, Gemini, which I have found to be useful, that it could be having a negative effect in that people aren't going back to the original source. Although I also agree with Alex that for any information to be credible, you need to be able to trace that back to the source and see exactly what those citations are, because I have found with some of the AI things, they're citing just random things from the internet. Could be a blog, not necessarily anything really authoritative or credible. And I think that's really important. So, Nik, could you talk about that a little bit, what your impressions are and what are the guardrails what can museums do, as you said, to be more AI friendly and also benefit for themselves?
Let's not forget that Google is an advertising agency, right? They just happen to be in the search business, right? And now they just happen to be getting into the AI business because that will allow them to keep more eyes on the Google website, Google apps, etc. So, to use a British euphemism, I wouldn't trust these large language model vendors to sit the right way around on a toilet seat. They are a business that wants to make as much money as they can and give their shareholders as much money back as they can. So we should be right to distrust them. Google Arts and Culture is about, again, bringing eyes. They picked a domain, arts and culture, building a website to get more eyes on it. Yes, they do provide links back, but what is evident from how they've implemented Gemini on Google search is they don't want people leaving their site, right? They want to keep people around. And I think that's something we have to deal with. Certainly, retargeting your website to be more friendly, because you can't compete, right? As a single institution, you can't compete with Google. If it wants to, increase the AI, interpretation using your data, it's going to do it. So you just have to kind of go along. So GEO, generative engine optimization, is about ensuring that the content that you have is like the top 10 search results, right? With SEO, we all wanted to be in the top 10 first if we can. You need to be the authoritative description and response when you ask Google a question now that's coming back from AI. And so you do that with structured data. It's exactly what Alex said. It's the same thing in a digital asset management system now as it is for your website. Much more structured data, probably following schema.org, and then also FAQs and more kind of conversational answers. That's kind of what works.
Thank you. That you mentioned having a lot of Q&A kind of information on the website, and that reminded me of a feature that the Museum of American Art had a number of years ago called Joan of Arc. You may remember that, where people could write in and the curator would answer their question. And eventually they had to give it up because it was just too time consuming. Is that the kind of thing that would be best, more successful now, potentially?
Right. The best training for an AI engine is a combination of data, so collections data, and there's some examples that we've done a project with Strategic Air Command. Collections data augmented by recording volunteers giving tours around the institution and recording the questions that are asked of them and their answers. That combination is the best training, and so that translates to, your websites. It's structured data with questions and answers. So you're actually, because we, when you're using an AI platform, you give it examples and say, I want you to do this based on these examples. And so it's exactly the same thing. Here's a series of questions and answers. These are examples for you to use when you are determining what, a response to a question is.
Great, thank you. So also going back to the issue of jobs and what AI can do and can't do, what would your advice be to students who are, preparing to enter the workforce and want to be able to demonstrate proficiency in using AI responsibly and effectively, because they certainly might be using it in a professional job in a museum when they graduate? What would you recommend? Alex, you want to start with take that question and then?
Yeah, certainly. Whenever I hear this question, my recommendation is always more education. The more knowledge that you have in your tool belt, the better, including prompt training is really important. I highly encourage that. Just understanding what AI is, what AI tools are capable of, just even very basic knowledge, and just using it more. Really, the more that you use it, the more that you understand it, the better knowledge and experience that you gain from that will help you. And I know Nik can elaborate on this.
No, I mean, you're right. So it used to be, resumes used to be must have Microsoft Office skills, right?
Yeah.
And now the fact that you are sending somebody a Microsoft document, you have the Microsoft skills to do that. I think increasingly, there's a saying that AI isn't going to replace your job, but somebody with AI skills probably will. And so I think it's exactly what Alex said. Be comfortable, learn how to properly prompt, learn how to get the best out of an AI engine, learn some different engines, I would say, and be familiar with the tools and the platforms. So there was a recent study, and I was looking for there's actually a great newsletter called The Neuron, which is kind of an AI digest that comes out every day. Has a lot of really good information in it. And there was definitely a survey, and I was trying to find it, that referred to it was a survey that found that 95% AI was given this task of trying to replace a human, and it found that 95% of the jobs it was given, it couldn't replace a human. So I think, again, there's this hype coming from all these tech companies, right? Which we're all just getting sucked into believing. Anybody you saw that survey with the distrust from, topped by Americans, more concerned than positive. It's right to be very skeptical about it. It doesn't do exactly what it says on the tin, but it is a very effective tool used. It's exactly as Alex said, in a controlled environment with trusted data and with guardrails around it, and learn how to do that. I think is the most the best advice I could give.
One real world example I'd like to add to that is that a lot of companies, organizations are using AI to scan resumes. So making your resume AI friendly will also help you out a lot in the long run.
So how would you do that? How would you make your resume more AI friendly?
Oh, that's going to depend.
You've got to figure, you've got to think like a large language model, right? I mean, there's been an evolution certainly in resumes. So it went from you sending your resume and cover letter to an email address and somebody going through it. And we knew then that the average time spent reading a resume and a cover letter was about 5 seconds, right? Because you immediately the should tell you is you have 200 resumes to get through in an hour, and you can't
Mhm.
spend that amount of time. Then these applicant tracking systems came in, which were just looking for basic keywords, and so you would sometimes, depending on your resume, you would never see your resume would never get to a hiring manager, right? Because it had been excluded based on some of the questions that you answered. Did you have 5 years experience of this? Yes or no? It's completely black and white. I think in in some circumstances now, there's a lot more, it's a lot more fungible. So it's less, if you don't have, if you only have 4 years and 11 months of an experience and it's 5 years, an AI engine will kind of pick that up. So in some respects, it may be a little better, but again, there's no guarantees that how well you've trained. If the hiring manager is training for a particular job search, there's no guarantee that that hiring manager is any good at prompting. So it it's a wild west out there right now for hiring, and I think to counter that, network and get inside track in any institution that you can. I think that's the best advice. It's the same
Yep.
for marketing right now, right? It's so good. The marketing that gets through now is mail, post, because there's such a just mass of influx in your inbox that the stuff that's getting through is kind of old school. And I think going back to networking is getting the inside track is how I would
Just
recommend you proceed.
one thing I'd want to add for the resume part of it is that using the same language as the job description in your resume will also help you with the AI that's reviewing all of those resumes.
Good point.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to come back to the policy issue. And what about museums that are not ready yet to implement AI in their curatorial practice? What are the main barriers, and what are the existing policies that you think are most urgent to be updated for to integrate AI effectively in museums?
I can go first. Well, the adoption curve, right? The odds are against institutions adopting it, right? Because that adoption curve, so there's the innovators and there's the early adopters, and those are the people. So that's like 16% of the pool. There is what's known as the chasm between the early adopters and the earlier majority, and that's where most kind of technological innovation fails, is crossing the chasm from early adoption to kind of mainstream. And I think there's if you look at museums who are doing some interesting AI stuff, it's a very small percentage that is formal. But there's a lot of people out there, like I said, using personal accounts to do this. There's definitely a fear of job loss, so there's definitely resistance from, the perception that AI is going to take my job. And there are examples of AI taking job. One of the most serious critical areas, I think, is probably in security. So security cameras now have a lot of AI engineering behind them so that staffing can reduce. There was a museum in San Francisco that has reduced its operating budget by $2 million a year by reducing its security staff in favor of AI analysis. And I think partly that was based on the fact that physical presence of security had no correlation to the protection of collection objects. People would damage collection objects even if a security person was in the room. And so I think the image analysis, video analysis of proximity to collection objects is kind of much more accurate and quicker response from AI. And so you're certainly seeing it there. I think certainly marketing is a target, although I know of one instance of a museum who had a entry-level marketing coordinator who was not very good, and they were considering firing this person. But they came in the course of this one Monday morning, they came in all of a sudden, their content was much improved. And so they took them into the office and said, are you writing this? And they said, no, I confess, it's AI. And they were like, great, keep going. And so I think that's an actual example of, being informed, know how to use it, and get the best out of it.
Oh, thank you. So I understand there are some questions in Q&A that I apparently cannot see. So Karina, you mentioned that. Do you want to bring those in now? We still have a few more minutes.
Yep. Okay. We have a question that says, I am curious to know about how this technology is being developed to curate alternative, immersive, and accessible in-person exhibits, or if it is at this point.
There's one really good example I know at the Nasher Museum, which is part of Duke University, which did wanted to create an AI generated exhibition. And so if you go to their website, there's they talk about they asked ChatGPT to come up with half a dozen suggested themes for an exhibition. They primed it with their collection. They picked one, and then they went through this iterative process of having it determine the theme, the hang order, the object selection, and then do the interpretation. And to get past this notion of, our curators, that was another survey question we did, about how willing curators would be to allow AI interpreted content in front of their audiences. They addressed that by having, for every collection object on the wall, they had two wall labels. One was clearly marked AI generated, and one was clearly marked, curated by a human. And the exhibition, I think, is called Curated by AI. It's fascinating. And so, some people prefer the AI generated, it's in a much more familiar language. And some people prefer the more kind of, curatorial type presentation and description.
Thanks for sharing that. That's amazing. Is it currently up? Is this?
I think it may have closed now. I think it closed just at the end of last year. I saw an interesting demo. Sorry, Alex, not to hog the.
No, you're fine.
The Zoom. I saw a very interesting demo yesterday from an Israeli company who have an AI, kind of a concierge collections app where you prime it with your collection information, and then there are these administrative controls that allow you to, as one of the sliders is very academic, very curatorial, to much more kind of street language, or so much more interpretive, and you could kind of tweak it based on what your preference was. And I think you'll see as companies get more familiar and expert in tweaking and fine-tuning large language models, you'll see things like that much more, rather than just a blanket response. You'll see it much more controllable.
Thank you. And I know we're running short on time. One very detailed question and one sort of broader. The broader one is, what advice would you give for a museum currently undergoing a website redesign to make it more AI friendly?
Oh.
Structured content and conversational content. So structured data and conversational content. It's a great balance to achieve. I mean, there are a lot of things that you would do in SEO. Again, structured content, FAQs. You have to remember that AI is trying to answer you asking it a question, and so providing it with structured data to provide answers is the way to think about it.
Okay, and here is another question. Two really great presentations. Thank you. As you mentioned, Gen AI is driven by statistics. Can you speak more to how the two kinds of statistical errors may impact Gen AI interpretation of cultural data? Bias was mentioned, but what about variance? I'm curious, since museums, GLAMs are handling data that are representative of both the prototypical exemplars of big patterns as well as the rare, extraordinary, anomalous. What do we stand to lose or hide in our data by depending on statistical methods in this way, or are there correctives?
Ooh, what a great question.
Tune in next week for an entire presentation to answer that question. I mean, I think what you had to, the best description I've heard of how to interact with AI is you are as a prompter, as a person asking questions of it, you are a director, like a film director directing a performance out of somebody. We can all ask the exact same question of an AI engine at the same time and all get different answers because it's it, it it's statistically making it up as it goes along. And so I think that presents a challenge. It's always based on statistics. It's always going to be an average. But again, the previous example about this kind of slider of, accuracy is the more structured data you give it. And Alex talked all about this. And that's what, small plug for Terentia, because they've really got a handle on this, is a controlled environment, structured data, and a clear understanding of how the engine works to get out the specific information that you would get out of it. And Alex did not pay me to say that.
Thanks, Vic. Just kind of going back to the TRPL case, use case that I shared, that feedback loop is also very critical, and including the human review, because we don't want to lose or hide any of that critical information that we might want to be highlighting from our collections.
Well, I think we are out of time now. So unless there was any last minute things that anybody wants to contribute, I think we will thank our speakers and see you next time.